I'm J. Elias, General Legal Counsel at Dyer Lake Funeral Home in North Attleboro. Welcome to this episode of Live and Learn, a series of programs designed to be informative, educational, and upbeat, and always intended to enhance and encourage our personal wellness and awareness. Donald Rumsfeld, a former Navy pilot, honorably served as our country's Secretary of Defense, as White House Chief of Staff, U.S. Ambassador to NATO. He was a U.S. Congressman and the CEO of 2 Fortune 500 companies. And he's famously known for once having said, and I'll say it somewhat slowly, there are known knowns. These are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That's to say, there are things that we know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we don't know we don't know. Rumsfeld made the statement in response to a news briefing in 2002 about the lack of evidence linking the government of Iraq with the provision of weapons of mass destruction to various terrorist groups. As soon as he said the words unknown unknowns, a floodgate of comments and commentary followed. The expression wasn't so very uncommon, though, having been used in various forms in a number of government and business settings, including at NASA and in the field of homeland security. But this program's not quite so heady or heavy, and we won't be exploring homeland security, national defense, or outer space. Instead, we'll take a fun look at a few things in everyday life. Some you may already know, or at least you thought you knew, and others you may not have known you didn't know. Let's start with something as commonplace as a pair of blue jeans, or waist overalls as they were first called by the Levi Strauss Company back in the 1870s, when the company received a patent for what was called an improvement in fastening pocket openings. I'm sure you've noticed that most blue jeans have that tiny extra pocket atop one of the 2 larger front pockets. People have found countless items to put in those little pockets, from stashing coins to tubes of lip balm, but it turns out the little pocket was specifically created for a common accessory of the day, a pocket watch. And by the way, the fancy stitching on the back pocket, well, it has a name. It's called arcuate stitching. Arcuates, or arcs, are signature patterns primarily there for decorative purposes, but that also help secure a pocket lining from the pressure when putting a wallet or any other item in the back pocket. This next known unknown has been hiding right under our noses for a very long time, and it may be a real unknown unknown for a lot of people. It's that familiar Chinese takeout box that most of us can instantly recognize. The boxes were actually patented in 1894, and they were first called paper pails. And its inventor, a fellow by the name of Frederick Weeks Wilcox, had folded paper into a container shape and secured it with a wire handle for easy carrying. Since the entire container was made from one piece of paper, it could even be easily folded out to mimic a plate shape, eliminating the need to dirty a plate for dinner. The Japanese art of origami served as his inspiration for the boxes, since each container was made from only a single sheet of paper and designed to fold up in such a way that it would prevent any food or sauce from leaking out. And although the design was originally created to carry raw oysters, the Chinese food industry was beginning to take off in America around the time of its invention, and the two soon went hand in hand. So it's a takeout container and a plate. And if you use a computer or even a keyboard with your various devices, take a look at the letters F and J, and you'll notice 2 little ridges beneath those letters. Those small bumps help position your left and right hands without having to look at the keyboard. For example, without looking at your hands, you can feel the small bumps to correctly position your left and right index fingers. And once your hands are on the home row key position, as it's called, you can locate the remainder of the keys on the keyboard. And now, to soda cans. You probably know about this one if you drink a lot of soda or seltzer in cans. Pop open the can with the tab, and you'll notice a little hole in the tab. It's not just to open the can. Flipping the tab makes it a small straw holder to keep the straw in place, especially from those carbonated bubbles forcing the straw upwards. And on the subject of holes, it's easy to miss this one because it's so small. You may never have noticed it, or you didn't know what it was for. It's that tiny hole near the cameras on your iPhone cell phone. It's a microphone, in fact, one of 3 on an Apple iPhone, if that's what you've got. There's also a microphone hidden under the speaker grill on the front, and another one sitting on the phone's bottom edge. And that triple microphone configuration, well, it was introduced with the launch of the iPhone 5 in 2012. The third microphone is naturally there to help the phone pick up all the sounds around you no matter how you decide to hold your phone. And it helps with voice recognition, which is becoming increasingly important with the use of virtual assistants. Think, "Hey Siri." And the next one, padlocks. Although not every padlock has them, most do. Most are designed with a tiny hole at the bottom of the padlock next to the key. Some people think it's there to be able to open the lock with a paper clip if you've lost your key. But for those who think that's what it's for, I'd suggest you give it another thought. Why would we need a key for a padlock if we could universally use a paper clip? The hole on the bottom of a padlock, well, it's there to allow for quick and easy drainage when the lock is submerged underwater. And it's to prevent water from accumulating inside, which could rust the metal on outdoor locks. And speaking of holes, and what you may not have known you didn't know, if you've ever sat in the window seat of an airplane and looked closely at the window, chances are you may have noticed a tiny hole at the bottom of the window. Known as bleed holes, they help regulate air pressure changes as planes climb to cruising altitudes of up to 33,000 feet. At high altitudes, air pressure and oxygen levels are reduced. And so to maintain comfort for passengers, cabin pressure and oxygen levels are maintained at levels higher than the surrounding atmosphere. But that pressure difference puts enormous strain on the windows. To help deal with the pressure, plane windows are engineered in 3 distinct layers. The inside pane that we can touch while seated is only superficial. The middle and outer panes are the layers that regulate pressure differences, and that bleed hole in the lower portion of the middle pane, that permits the outer pane to bear the strain of the low pressure outside by allowing the pressure to equalize between the passenger cabin and the air gap between the panes. It also helps prevent fogging by regulating the temperature between the inside and outside, allowing you to enjoy the views while flying. All right, one more hole that you may not have known you didn't know. Although the bottom of every wine bottle doesn't necessarily have that dimple or indentation, most do. The reason behind that little indent isn't clear, but it's most often said that the punt, as it's called, makes it easier to hold the bottle, and others say the punts make the bottles more resistant to high pressure and can better hold sparkling wines like champagne. From wine to candy. But still thinking about some of the things you don't know, it's probably fair to say that you haven't given a great deal of thought to why they call a Three Musketeers candy bar Three Musketeers. With that in mind, the candy was the 3rd product created by the Mars Candy Company in 1932, but that's not the reason. They had made M&Ms and something called the Mars bar, which in the United States is sold as the Milky Way bar. But back to the Three Musketeers bar. When it was first sold in the 1930s, when you purchased a Three Musketeers bar, there were 3 pieces of candy: vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry covered in chocolate. It was advertised as a candy bar so big that it could be shared with 2 friends. Hence, you and your 2 friends, the Three Musketeers. But then when the federal government began rationing sugar during World War II, the candy company chose to discontinue 2 of the 3 flavors. And so only the chocolate bars remained. And now from candy to chips. And what you may not know, you don't know. Constantly hearing from complaining customers about broken and stale potato chips, Procter & Gamble, a Cincinnati-based company, hired food chemists and organic engineers to create what they hoped would be the perfect potato chip. Victor Mills, a chemical engineer from Procter & Gamble, he's also credited, by the way, with the creation of Pampers. He worked closely with the company's food chemist, a fellow by the name of Frederick Bauer, and they addressed the problem common to potato chips. And the men soon realized that if the shape of the chip was uniform, they could be easily stacked one on top of another and stored in a way that would minimize breakage. And so Frederick Bauer won a patent on that tubular container that we know of as Pringles in 1970, that tennis ball can, vacuum sealed to house the chips and keep them fresh. Well, in later life, Bauer suffered from Alzheimer's disease. But while he was still quite communicative and lucid, he would tell his family that when he died, he wanted to be cremated and his ashes buried in a certain cemetery in Cincinnati, Ohio. He also used to tell his children that he wanted some of his ashes to be buried in a Pringles can. And so on his death in 2008, and at his request, some of Frederick Bauer's ashes were buried in the very container that helped launch the billion-dollar snack food. From Pringles to Pez, Edward Haas was part of an enterprising family in Vienna, Austria. In the mid-1920s, he used peppermint oil to create what he intended to be a sophisticated, strong, cold-pressed peppermint candy. Think of Altoids. Haas called the tiny sugar-based and brick-shaped tablets Pez, short for Pfefferminz, the German word for peppermint. And the candies were immediately popular among his friends and colleagues. And before long, he created attractive pocket-sized tins for packaging them. Again, think like those little Altoid tins. As successful as the company became, Haas wanted to do better, and he soon began devising ways to market Pez to give the product a broader appeal. And it was just after World War II, and cigarette smoking had become very popular. Haas himself was something of an anti-smoking advocate, and he thought his peppermints might appeal to people who were trying to quit, offering them something to put in their mouths instead of a cigarette, while also acting as a breath freshener. He decided that smokers were the perfect target market for Pez, and in 1947, he and his colleagues designed a Pez dispenser that looked very similar to a cigarette lighter and dispensed one candy at a time. It was called a Pez box. Up until then, Pez relied on using attractive Pez girls in its advertising to appeal to an adult market. But Haas realized that approach wouldn't work when it began exporting Pez candies to the United States in 1952. And when it did so, it saw its sales in the U.S. were somewhat lackluster. Why? The company recognized that children were the ones who seemed most interested in Pez in the United States. And so Haas began devising a marketing strategy that catered primarily to children. Although he did it reluctantly, he decided to take Pez into the realm of children's toys as well. And by 1955, it was decided that cartoon heads would be attached to the top of Pez dispensers. And at that same time, the company introduced new fruit flavors designed for kids: lemon, orange, strawberry, and grape. Santa Claus, Popeye, and Space Troopers were said to have been the earliest character heads placed on the top of Pez packages. And the new Pez, it was an immediate hit. Bozo the Clown, Casper the Friendly Ghost, Mickey Mouse were among those that followed. And since the 1950s, hundreds of cartoon characters and historical figures have made it to the top of Pez dispensers, many of them collectible. In fact, it's said that the rarest and most valuable Pez dispenser is a political donkey According to the company, the dispenser is one of only 2 political donkey dispensers known to exist. A man in New York found it when he helped clean out items in his grandfather's house. It seems the vice president of Pez apparently gave the dispenser to the man's grandfather in the early 1960s. It had originally been presented to President John F. Kennedy by the Pez Company when Kennedy visited Vienna in 1961. But the Secret Service at the time gave orders for the White House to return the case and candy set to Pez. At the time, Pez also presented 2 other dispensers to the Kennedys. A golden dispenser, no surprise, for Jackie Kennedy, and a Bozo the Clown dispenser for Caroline. By the way, that Pez donkey dispenser, it was auctioned and is thought to have brought in between $12,000 and $15,000. Candy and chips to ice cream. Reuben Matus was a Jewish immigrant from Poland who came to the United States as a young man in the 1920s. He worked for his uncle's Italian ice business in Brooklyn, squeezing lemons with his widowed mother and selling the tart, icy treat from a horse-drawn cart. Over the next decade, the Matus family expanded their business to include ice cream sandwiches, ice cream bars, and popsicles, all with just a lukewarm reception by the public. And yet, in a fiercely competitive market, Matus believed he could grow the business by focusing on the quality of the ice cream. Motivated by his desire to create a thicker, creamier ice cream, he spent about 25 years experimenting with the taste and texture of his ice cream. And the result was an ice cream so rich and dense that it actually broke all of the family's existing ice cream machines. Matus and his wife, Ruth, were convinced that their innovative, ultra-rich version of ice cream would exude an air of sophistication, particularly given that ice cream was already perceived as a luxurious treat. And so, in a bid to appeal to a more affluent clientele, they rebranded their ice cream with a foreign-sounding name, Häagen-Dazs. A master marketer made us believe that wealthy Americans would be drawn to a brand with an exotic European sound to it, and specifically chose a Danish-sounding name to honor Denmark's notable actions in World War II. Matus said that the only country which saved the Jews during World War II was Denmark, so he put together a totally fictitious Danish name and had it registered. He was referring to Denmark's 1943 rescue operation that ferried the majority of its Jewish population to safety in neutral Sweden. He also made it clear that the name Häagen-Dazs has no meaning whatsoever. And he even went further to attract attention to this exotic brand by using what's called an umlaut, those 2 dots over the letter A in the brand name. By the early 1970s, Häagen-Dazs emerged as the only luxury ice cream brand in the U.S. with nationwide distribution. A name that initially meant nothing took on new meaning, and the family sold Häagen-Dazs to Pillsbury for $70 million. And here's one that you might not have known you didn't know. It's been circulating for years. That Wendy's restaurant logo and the word mom. It's often been questioned whether the company was trying to relay a subliminal message under Wendy's collar to send to customers what clearly appears to be the word M-O-M embedded in the logo as sort of an encouragement that the food is like mom's home cooking. You decide for yourself. And if you didn't already know that, Baskin-Robbins offered 31 flavors when they first started out. Take a look at the logo, and you'll see how it offers another clue. The magic number 31, it's hidden in the curve of the B and the stem of the R. The company is now owned by the same company that owns Dunkin' Donuts, by the way. It's called Inspire Brands. This next one is as clear as the nose on your face when you look at it. The 2 T's in the center of the logo on Tostitos chips. Salsas and dips are 2 people munching on chips. The I between them, as you'll see in the picture on your screen, is intended to be a bowl of salsa at a table and a chip on top of that. Amazon is just about everywhere these days. Their delivery trucks and vans can be seen hopscotching across roads wherever you look. But did you ever really consider its simple and straightforward logo and its very intentional message? The arrow underneath the letters isn't just a design element or even a smile, which is what I thought it stood for. That arrow broadcasts the wide variety of things sold on Amazon. That is everything from A to Z. And that brings us to the logo of another company whose trucks and planes crisscross the country and the world. Headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, the company began as a small package delivery outfit in 1971. There have been only 3 logo redesigns in its 50-plus year history. FedEx used to be known by its full business name, Federal Express, reportedly to show a kind of link between the civilian population and the U.S. government, and the choice of the words in the name was to do just that. The 1973 logo that you see on your screen was designed with the company's new brand name at the time, and it was intended to convey speed of delivery, which is why the logo needed to convey it creatively, and it was accomplished with the lettering in the word EX in FedEx, creating a forward-facing arrow. Look carefully at this optical illusion, and you'll see the arrow in the word X. And speaking of name brands, are you familiar with something called product placement? Have you ever watched a television show or movie and a particular product is clearly seen on the screen? Maybe the can of Coca-Cola in someone's hand is on the screen, a Ford truck with the logo prominently featured, or someone wearing a pair of Nike sneakers that reportedly and repeatedly is seen on camera. It's variously called product placement, or embedded advertising, or embedded marketing strategy. And it's an effective type of advertising in which a company pays to place its product on the set. It's often noted that a significant turning point in product placement occurred in Steven Spielberg's blockbuster 1982 movie E.T., where the lovable alien was drawn out of hiding when Elias, a 10-year-old character, leaves a trail of Reese's Pieces. Reese's Pieces were a relatively new product at the time, having been introduced by the Hershey Company only 4 short years before the movie's release. Well, in the original screenplay, Elias left a trail of M&Ms, not Reese's Pieces. It's said that M&Ms were one of Steven Spielberg's favorite candies, and when the movie maker contacted Mars Candy, the maker of M&Ms, the company wanted to see the full script of the movie to be comfortable that their M&M product was being associated in a positive way. The problem was that Spielberg was highly protective and secretive about the movie, and he didn't want to send the script. Instead, he provided the candy company executives with a very broad overview of the film. And so M&M declined to sign off. Big mistake. As a result, Spielberg chose Reese's Pieces as a replacement for M&Ms. And Hershey Foods, which owned Reese's Pieces, struck a deal to promote the movie, dedicating $1 million to advertising. And Universal Studios allowed Hershey Foods to feature E.T. in all of its media campaigns for Reese's Pieces. Earning close to $800 million at the box office from a budget of just $10.5 million, E.T. became a significant hit, and sales for Reese's Pieces jumped 85% in the weeks following its release. Remarkably, the film and the candy are still inextricably linked, with the deal between the movie and the food company being one of the most successful examples of product placement in movie history. And here's another example of product placement, and what you didn't know you didn't know. Few military films have been as successful as 1986's Top Gun, starring Tom Cruise as Maverick, a U.S. Navy pilot. Its dazzling aerial footage kept audiences coming back for more, eventually making it the highest-grossing film of the year. And just as he had done 3 years earlier in the movie Risky Business, when he wore Ray-Ban sunglasses, Wayfarer sunglasses, Cruise popularized another line of Ray-Ban sunglasses, this time the Aviator. And it said the film boosted sales of Ray-Ban's Aviator sunglasses by 40% in the first 7 months of release. And even more interestingly, the movie helped boost recruitment in the U.S. Navy, which set up recruitment booths in movie theater lobbies across the country. People signed up to be Navy pilots. And finally, Thanks to the inclusion in the Toy Story franchise, Etch-a-Sketch experienced a whopping 4,000% increase in sales. And sales of Mr. Potato Head increased by 800% after the original Toy Story release, prompting the manufacturers to actually alter the product to make it look more similar to the character in the film. The franchise even put Slinky Dog's manufacturer, which had ceased trading, back into business after it was inundated with 20,000 new orders. I'm Jay Elias. Thank you for watching this episode of Live and Learn. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to your joining me again for another program designed to enhance and encourage your personal wellness and awareness. Until then, remember, it's never too late to learn. And in closing, it's pretty remarkable how much we don't know what we don't know.